about the kind of solution that is proposed by way of these amendments.
It gives me great pleasure to follow the noble lady Baroness of Beeston, not least because she became a dissenting voice and I was dreading that I might be the only one. So first of all, I think it's important that we establish that those of us who have spent decades fighting violence against women and girls are not complacent about it. But the question is whether this bill and whether the violence that we describe there, which is physical violence, is the same as the kind of abuse that's being discussed in relation to these set of amendments. And I do worry about conflating online incivility, abuse, vile things said, and physical violence in the way that sometimes is done. I noticed that Refuge, which is an organisation I've got a great deal of respect for, suggested that the user empowerment duties that opted to, as it explained, place the burden on users, on women users to filter out their own online experience was the same as asking women to take control of their own safety and protect themselves offline with violence. Whereas I thought that was unfair because actually the user empowerment duties and deciding what you filter actually can be women using their agency. And in that context, I wanted to probe in relation to Amendment 104 in the name of Lord Stevenson of Balmacara, whether affording, as it states, a higher standard of protection to women and girls could actually be disempowering. I'm always concerned about discriminatory special treatment for women. I worry that we end up presenting to young women or describing young women as particularly vulnerable due to their sex, to overemphasise victimhood that in and of itself can undermine young women's confidence, rather than encouraging them to see themselves as strong, to encourage resilience and so on. I was especially worried about Amendment 171 in the name of Baroness Featherstone, but she's not here to move her amendment. But that did, just to quickly say, it does say that content that promotes or perpetuates violence against women or girls, the content should be removed, the users removed, if they were identified as either creating or even disseminating. And one of the things that always worries me about this bill is that because we want to improve the world, I know that's the joint enterprise here, that we can get carried away. So whereas in the law we have a very narrow definition of what incitement to violence is here, we're very specific about it. I worry about this low threshold, that somebody who creates what maybe is a horrible sexist meme and will actually be punished in that way, but then somebody who just retweets it will be treated in that way, which I want to be able to have a conversation about why that is the wrong thing to do, but I'm worried about, as I always am, about censorship and so on and so forth. The other thing is that the statistics are a bit confusing on this, despite often repeated statistics. When you dig down and looking at academic papers and talking to people who work in this field, I mean, an academic paper from the Oxford Internet Institute with its survey from August 2021 notes that the prevalence of online hostility to women as exceptional is largely based on anecdotal experience, and that a closer look across the British population, contrary to conventional wisdom, shows that women are not necessarily more likely than men to experience a hateful speech online. And I do think that it also notes, however, that there is empirical evidence to show that subgroups of women, actually it cites journalists and politicians, can be disproportionately targeted. And I'm not going to go through all of the stats, although I've got them here. But it was kind of distinction between very small differences of kind of 2 or 3%. And in some instances, actually with young men actually being more likely to suffer at the hands of abuse. Ofcom's Online Nation report from June 2022 actually says that women are more negatively affected by trolling and so on. But again, I worry about the gender point, because I am worried that what we are trying to tackle here is what we all know to be a toxic and nasty political atmosphere in society that's reflected online. I mean, you don't have to... we all know what we're talking about. People bandy around the most vile labels against each other, and we see that regularly on social media. And it does, if you're a woman, you know, take on this nasty, sexist side to it. It is incredibly unpleasant. But I also think that we have to recognise that that's a broad moral, social and cultural problem, which I would hope that we would try ourselves to counter. So I'm no men's rights sympathiser by any stretch. But I also noticed that the Ofcom report said that men are more likely, young men are more likely than women to have experienced potentially threats of to have experienced seeing potentially harmful behaviour or content online in the 4 weeks before. That was 64% to women, 60%. But the threats of physical violence were actually more prevalent with boys than women, 16% versus 11%. Sexual violence the other way around. So I just want us to have a sense of proportion, and also to not say that anyone who's on the receiving end of this harmful, nasty trolling is to be ignored, regardless of what sex they are. It's also interesting to finish that UK women are avid users of social media platforms, spending more than a quarter of their waking hours online, with around half an hour each day more than men. So when we say that the online world is inhospitable to women, there's a lot of them on there regardless. So we do have to have a sense of perspective. And Ofcom's report makes the point that it says that the benefits of being online often outweigh the risks. Women do disagree with that more. 63% that's not true, are less likely to agree. 71% male. But I just think there's a sense of perspective here, because actually the majority of young men and women like being online, and sometimes it can give young women a sense of solidarity and sisterhood. And all the surveys that I've read say that while female participants say that they feel less able to share their opinions and use their voice online, we have to ask why. The young people that I work with, many of them are young, the majority in fact are young women, will say the reason they dare not speak online is not because of misogynist hate speech, but because of cancel culture, because they're walking on eggshells with so many things that you're not allowed to say. And you'll be aware as well that in, for example, gender-critical circles, a lot of the misogynistic hate speech is directed at women who are not towing the line on a particular orthodoxy today. So what I don't want is a remedy to some of that toxic women not being sure if they can speak out. Because of cancel culture, is that we have a remedy that introduces more censorious trends.
My Lords, it's an honour to follow all the